At the climax of the Clone War, Darth Sidious was accelerating his plans to sway Anakin Skywalker to the dark side and time his destruction of the Jedi Order, but his subordinates Dooku and Grievous harboured their own ambitions with the Confederacy. With Palpatine providing the Nexus route coordinates to Grievous, the droid general had a path through to the heart of the Galactic Republic of Coruscant, and the surprise attack stunned the underprepared Republic Navy. Whilst Grievous could have completed a takeover of Coruscant's airspace, Dooku and more specifically Sidious asked him to hold back so that Anakin Skywalker could arrive to stage a rescue. The Sith Lord judged the ever-increasingly predictable Jedi to perfection, with Anakin and his master Obi-Wan Kenobi leading their squadrons through the aerial battle until they landed on the Invisible Hand. The two esteemed Jedi fought through to the upper observation deck, where they found and captured Palpatine, and with persuasion from the secret Sith Lord, Anakin took a step closer to the dark side by killing Dooku. But when the Jedi and Palpatine were caught in ray shields, Grievous had a chance to defeat them all and succeed where Dooku had failed. As the Invisible Hand sustained crippling damage from the Republic Navy's counterattack, Grievous brought the captives to his bridge, but before he could decide what to do with them, the astromech droid R2-D2 freed the Jedi, and Grievous fled via an escape pod. But what if Grievous had somehow killed everyone aboard the Invisible Hand, including the Jedi and Palpatine? How would the Clone War end? Would the Galactic Republic still fall apart? The story begins just after the Jedi and Palpatine are captured, beneath the ray shield in hallway 328. As Grievous stood on one of the podiums and gazed out of the viewport, he knew that the Invisible Hand was about to fall apart. Not only were the alarms on the flagship systems flashing vibrantly, but also the Republic's Commander Nida of Group 5 of the Coruscant Home Defense Fleet had just ordered for him to surrender. Still heavily misguided in his belief that Dooku was still alive, the cyborg wondered why the Separatist leader had not ordered for him to secure his victory, rather than let the Jedi onto his ship and allow for the Republic to counterattack. Now it made more sense, as Grievous saw both Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, two continuous thorns in the side of the Separatists throughout the war, now firmly in his grasp. A slightly tremoring 00M command battle droid interrupted his victorious thoughts and informed him that the captives were being brought to the bridge. When the doors opened, Grievous was face to face with the Jedi and Palpatine, and it was the young Skywalker who intrigued him the most. Grievous was surprised as someone of Skywalker's reputation was so young, and from some of his tactics on the air, there was no doubt that an escape was on the man's mind. Adding the two lightsabers to his collection, he ordered his IG-101 and IG-102 Magna Guards to keep shocking the prisoners, and whilst they were distracted, Grievous took one of the Electrostaffs from another Magna Guard, then a Class A thermal detonator from a B-1 battle droid. Between shocks of the Electrostaff, the Jedi tried to signal to R2-D2 to free them from their stun cuffs, but the astromech was in no position to answer, as it was also under the torture of the Magna Guards. Even Palpatine was considering using some of his hidden abilities to free himself, but before he could decide, Grievous declared that this was the end for the Jedi and their beloved Chancellor. Throwing his Electrostaff into the viewport, he ordered for the escape pods to be released one at a time before leaping into space. The sudden change of pressure in the bridge threw the captives towards the front of the area, and as Grievous watched them sliding, he released the pin from the detonator and threw it inside. The effect was instant, as the bridge was torn apart by the resulting explosion, and the cyborg himself had to use his grappling cables to attach himself to one of the last remaining escape pods. As Grievous escaped from the crumbling inferno, the demise of the two heroic Jedi was felt by nearly every person at the Jedi Temple, with none more affected than Grandmaster Yoda. Having been focused on destroying the Separatist fleet, the losses of Anakin and Obi-Wan were a sudden shock to him, and Mace Windu soon joined the Grandmaster, confirming what he had also felt. The victory that had been gained through the retreat of Grievous was a hollow one, and as the Navy drove away the remainder of Grievous's fleet, Yoda and Mace Windu boarded their personal starfighters. After communicating with Commander Nida and the rest of the Home Defense Fleet, the two Jedi joined a small squad of clone troopers in searching the wreckage. Of what was left of the Invisible Hand, the group managed to find Dooku's curved-hilted lightsaber, but the explosion had damaged most other evidence, and they would have to await Quinlan Vos, who was moving between worlds in the Outer Rim. Though the Jedi had sensed the losses of the Jedi in the Force, this was insufficient evidence for the Republic investigators, who were searching for the missing Chancellor. The initial view was the Palpatine was missing, most likely taken by Grievous to gain favour for the Separatist campaign, but Yoda believed that there was something more sinister at play. The somber mood which now surrounded the Jedi was replicated in the Senate building, as Padmé Amidala was bereft at the loss of Anakin in particular, who she was prepared to talk to about their forthcoming child. Despite wanting to participate in discussions surrounding the missing Chancellor, Bail Organa Mon Mothma convinced Amidala to remain in her apartment, for fear of endangering the life of the child, whilst they helped to prevent the Republic from the verge of a collapse. As Padmé was left to the care of her handmaidens and C-3PO, she knew that the senators were trying to protect her and her child, but her instincts trained through the Theed Royal Academy refused to let her sit in her apartment. Having been given a brief report of the events over Coruscant, she didn't believe that Anakin and Obi-Wan would have met their end in such tame circumstances, and believed that there was something suspicious at play. Against the wishes of her handmaidens, Padmé planned to visit the site of the wreckage in a Naboo starskiff, but she was soon stopped in her tracks when her handmaidens rushed through to the veranda and informed her of an incoming transmission. Padmé was in no mood to talk to anyone at this moment, but her eyes of anger softened when she heard that it was from Mandalore and allowed the transmission to pass through. Expecting to see Commander Rex, as he was one of the only people she and Anakin had entrusted to keep their marriage a secret, she was not surprised to see he was accompanied by former Jedi Padawan Ahsoka Tano, who had figured out the marriage herself. Both of their faces matched Padmé's, and the senator finally believed that Anakin was truly gone. Promising to return to Coruscant with Maul, Ahsoka and Rex left the grief-stricken senator, and they were now filled with an intense determination to find Maul and perhaps bring an end to the Clone War. But once the 3 Venator-class Star Destroyers and their crews landed on Mandalore, the waves of defences which they expected to encounter were notably absent. Ahsoka, Bo-Katan and Rex knew better than to assume Maul had abandoned Mandalore without a reason that benefited him, and spread their resources across the city of Sundari to search for any signs of Maul. Though the clones found remnants of recent activity, such as discarded Super Commando armour, it was only when Ahsoka reached through to the throne room that they found why Maul had left Mandalore. At the centre of the room sat a solitary holotable, previously used by the Duchess during political meetings, and pressing the button to activate the latest recording, the intimidating Maul stood in front of them. The former Sith had obviously been expecting Anakin and Obi-Wan, but having sensed his master Darth Sidious fall, he had no need to use the Jedi to his advantage, and the reported demise of Obi-Wan meant his thirst for blood had been satisfied. Leaving those in the throne room to speculate on his future threats, Maul's hologram faded, and Bo-Katan was worried that Maul was trying to lure them into a false sense of security. Ahsoka and Rex needed no second invitations to leave Mandalore, and as Bo-Katan set about establishing control of the planet, in the event Maul returned, they made the journey to Coruscant. The anticlimactic ending to the events on Mandalore left Ahsoka and Rex feeling the opposite of Maul, as they wanted vengeance for what had happened to Anakin and Obi-Wan, and the reports of General Grievous were intriguing. But upon their return to Coruscant, they realised that their focus should be on Padmé, and they headed directly for her apartment, instead of reporting to the Jedi. When they arrived, Padmé was resting on the advice of her medical droids and handmaidens, so C-3PO was there to greet the guests, and even the protocol droid was upset, both at the loss of its creator and R2-D2, whose domed head had been found amongst the wreckage. At the same time as those on Mandalore returned, Bail Organa and Mon Mothma were in the arena of chaos known as the Galactic Senate Chamber, and the disappearance of Palpatine was the reason. The Separatists were attempting to use his absence to show the fragility of the Republic, and the new evidence of the loss of Dooku was twisted to conspire the Jedi against the interests of their faction. Organa and Mon Mothma knew these were the usual Separatist twists on events, and were attempting to extinguish the flames of fury from the other senators, but without any incriminating evidence, they were struggling to reverse the opinion, and trudged back to Padmé's apartment, hoping the Naboo senator would have more ideas. When they arrived, they were met by Ahsoka and Rex, and the 2 Republic senators both had the same idea, and asked them if they could infiltrate the Chancellor's office. The fellow guests were highly skeptical of this mission, as security had increased since his disappearance, and revealing what Maul had told them about Darth Sidious, and they now wondered if these events were connected. With Maul sadistically admitting the identity of Darth Sidious, those in Padmé's apartment began to plan for a way to search Palpatine's office, hoping for a clue to his location or status. Using the schematics of the Republic Executive Building to search for a weakness, as well as any other information they could find, They discovered that there were rotas of maintenance throughout the offices, and with the 332nd Company itching for action, Rex disguises several of the clone troopers as maintenance workers. Entering the building through one of the docking bays, they bypassed the entrance guards by stating that they were here to perform repairs on several of the offices, and accompanied by the 2 senators, they are allowed into the building. Bail Organa and Mon Mothma enhanced the disguise by allowing their own offices to be inspected, and other senators were now distracted, wondering if they would also be subjected to inspection. As senators now anticipated their own rooms being looked at, the disguised clones now had access to the maintenance shaft, which covered the ceilings of the offices, and Rex led them into Palpatine's office. Covering the window with pieces of scaffolding, which at least appeared convincing from the outside, the clones searched through Palpatine's office. Whilst the clones were not specialists in antiquities, the eerie aura exuded from the ancient Sith decorations made the clones shudder, but also feel confused at how the Jedi could have missed this. When the clones searched the statues, they found finely crafted lightsabers, and Rex reported this to Ahsoka, who was overseeing the operation from a ground level post, and served as backup. After initially thinking Palpatine was being framed like she had previously been, she started to think more diligently about Maul's passing words, and perhaps Palpatine was not as he seemed. Anakin had spoken glowingly about the Supreme Chancellor, but transmissions stored in databanks in his private office revealed conversations with Count Dooku about the young Skywalker. More archived files hidden behind the giant relief of the Great Hyperspace War were even more shocking, as there were a list of Palpatine's amendments and scribbled notes with his reasons behind the moves. The clones had no time to dwell on the shock of some of Palpatine's secrets, because Organa warned them that the guards were growing suspicious, and Rex ordered the clones to copy all the evidence, then return it to their original positions. Escaping through the maintenance network in the ceiling, the interior guards were too slow for the clones, and failed to notice any changes in Palpatine's office. With the evidence successfully gathered, the 332nd Company returned to the Republic military base, whilst the others headed for Organa's private estate of the Cantham House to assess what the clones have found. The politicians under the group of the delegation of 2000 shared the same views as Ahsoka, and the layers of deception that Palpatine and his Sith predecessors had worked tirelessly in the shadows to create were slowly being peeled away. The absence of Palpatine's body, which most likely disintegrated during the explosion of the Invisible Hand, with both Anakin and Obi-Wan, made it imperative to capture Grievous, and they dispatched Ahsoka and Rex to consult the Jedi Council. Ignoring her previous experience between these sacred walls, the former Padawan led the clone to the temple's war room, where the missing presences of Anakin and Obi-Wan were glaringly obvious. Presenting the evidence they'd found in Palpatine's office, the Jedi were gravely concerned, and it seemed Maul's declaration of the demise of Darth Sidious was what they'd felt in the Force, alongside of the other casualties of the Invisible Hand. Both Yoda, who had arrived on Kashyyyk, and the present Mace Windu felt ashamed that they allowed their order to be deceived, but for now, they had the more pressing issue of Grievous, who was the key to end the war. Though the investigators of the Invisible Hand's crash site had not found any clues to Grievous's escape, they deduced that he must have used escape pods, and one of the only allies he had left were the Separatist Council. The leading Separatists were notably absent from the chaos in the Senate, but from the notes acquired in the Palpatine office raid, they found a list of Separatist hideouts. With the Jedi already scattered across the galaxy, the likes of Plo Koon on Cato Nemoidia and Ki-Adi-Mundi on Mygeeto were also given the task of rounding up and interrogating any Separatists. Though Windu had initially tried to block Ahsoka's request to travel to Mustafar, Yoda overruled the decision in light of her role in the discovery of Palpatine's devious work, and with the 332nd Company, she was one of many ships to head to Separatist worlds. But before she completed her mission, Rex herself witnessed the births of Luke and Leia Skywalker, and Padmé's handmaidens assured everyone their best efforts to protect them until the war was over. The skies of Coruscant were soon introduced to waves of Republic starships, which departed at regular intervals, and amongst these was the largely unscathed Star Destroyer known as the Tribunal. Most of the 332nd Company were excited to finally see some action on the battlefield, but Rex warned them that this mission was unlike others in the war, as it could be their last in more ways than one. If Rex's speech had not focused the minds of the troopers, then the volcanic exterior of Mustafar most certainly did, and making their descent in a squadron of low-altitude assault gunships, they landed within the designated landing zone. The preliminary scans were not promising, as they failed to see any sign of Grievous or his ship, but they couldn't put it past the Separatists to hide at a secret base. Their suspicions are soon justified, following a risky aerial search, and the Klega Corp mining facility showed signs of life. As part of the Techno Union, this facility looked like a prime location for the Republic targets, and the Mustafarian guards marched to block their path. After Ahsoka's attempted mind trick failed, Rex resorted to his preferred version of attack, and firing 2 accurate shots with his DC-17 blaster pistols into the necks of the pair of guards. This activated a second line of defences. Having had the foresight to divide the company into smaller squads, the next wave of Mustafarians are pincered from several directions and are no match for the Republic forces. Now within the mining facility's walls, the Special Ops clone troopers were able to scan the interior of the facility, and they discover a previously hidden bunker which had been under construction specifically for this moment. Within its secure walls was not General Grievous, but a Separatist council, and using the installed control screens, they were able to monitor the progress of the Republic forces. What their defences had not accounted for was the presence of a Force sensitive, and the security droids and Gunray's personal battalion were soon falling like the other droids the 332nd Company had encountered. All of these clones were fueled by the same loss of their great commander Anakin Skywalker, and shared the same intense determination as their generals, and swiftly taking over the central wing, including the centrifuge ore extractor, they were now boldly striding towards the war room. Allowing their commander to lower the doors with the Force, the Separatist Council displayed their usual cowardice, and had retreated through to a secret passageway. The 332nd had anticipated this escape, and had split into smaller squads before breaching the bunker, so now they surrounded the Separatists. Taking great pleasure in finally detaining their slippery enemies, the clone troopers escort their prisoners to holding cells, whilst Ahsoka and Rex report their success to the Jedi Council. Expecting to see the hologram of Mace Windu, they are surprised to see fellow council member Shaq T, and the Togruta reports that Grievous had returned from his first attack. As it happened, the cyborg had not left the Coruscant system after his explosion of his flagship, and had evaded the Republic and Jedi investigators by seeking refuge on Coruscant's moon of Centax III, and where he could also summon reinforcements for his depleted fleet. Grievous's counterattack had torn through the alien Republic, and with most of the Jedi still holed out in the Outer Rim, it was up to Mace Windu to lead the defense. The Master of the Order had thought Anakin Skywalker was the shatter point of the war, but Grievous had thrown his premonitions to one side, and he felt an obligation to correct his misjudgment. Guiding the other Jedi at the temple to protect the scared civilians from the multi-troop transports, which were ominously descending on the galaxy's capital, Windu hunted for the cyborg himself. The Karoo Master wished that Obi-Wan was still alive, as the Jedi Master knew more about the droid commander than any other opponent, as he was one of the few to survive their encounters, and his recent mastery of Soresu made him better suited to fighting Grievous than himself. Ordering the clone troopers of the Coruscant Guard to join the search, either for Grievous or his ship, as the multi-troop transports were disembarking at their landing zone, one of the squads spotted Grievous' ship in the industrial sector. Windu knew exactly what the cyborg had planned. By disabling the power across the city and boarding a land speeder across the capital, he could hear the voice of the general growing louder. The Jedi scanned from a vantage point as Grievous stomped through the streets, searching for his next victim, whether it be a Jedi or an innocent bystander. The imposing march of Grievous is interrupted by a report from one of his tactical droids, and Windu senses his moment to attack. Lowering himself to a closer ledge, Windu extended both of his hands and crushed both of the droids as hard as he could, then smashed them into each other. Whilst the tactical droid was crushed into thousands of minuscule shards, Grievous's heavily modified skeleton prevented his organs from total collapse, and he turned to face the one who dared to attack him. The Jedi raised the pieces of the tactical droid and fired them to the recovering Grievous, who had already begun to ignite his lightsabers. The immense speed of the cyborg and his training under Dooku allowed him to deflect most of the sharp shards, but several managed to penetrate through his armour, and Grievous was now coughing and stumbling. Pressing a button on his wrist console to summon a ship, Windu had other ideas, and force-pushed Grievous into an empty multi-troop transport. The cyborg's breathing was now reduced to sputters, and now pointing his lightsaber at Grievous's disintegrating body, he ordered him to reveal what had happened to the Jedi and Palpatine. The cyborg had sustained too many injuries, and Windu's last force-orientated attack caused his entire body to shake and explode. The Jedi managed to salvage whatever lightsabers survived on Grievous, and reporting the news of Grievous's demise back to the temple, the Jedi Sanctuary needed this bit of good news, as the small number of clones were falling back compared to the vast droid army. The Jedi who had been helping to protect the other areas of Coruscant could now return to the temple and surprise the droids by trapping them in the temple's district. This allowed Windu to continue his pursuit for answers, which he had failed to extract from Grievous, and he ordered for his clones to seize Grievous's ship. Once the Belbullab 22 starfighter was taken to the Jedi Temple hangar, the technicians and mechanics stripped the starfighter one component at a time, and aside from the modified hyperdrive and weapon systems, they found an archive of Grievous's transmissions, which had been conducted through a transceiver. Incriminating conversations between Grievous and Dooku revealed that the Sith had intended to lure Anakin and Obi-Wan, and that the Republic and the rest of the Jedi would soon fall, thanks to their friends on Kamino. Those who were part of Palpatine's devious plans didn't know that this was the beginning of the end, as the Jedi led by Shakti led a large-scale investigation of the planet after the temple being brought back under Jedi control. Once the Jedi Master arrived on Kamino, she began a thorough search of every area and every Kaminoan on site, and as the Kaminoans protested their innocence, claiming to only be following the orders of Sifo Dyas, the Republic found conversations with Tyrannus. Though the Kaminoans had believed the chip had been for rogue Jedi, the reality was much more devious, and it confirmed some of the evidence in Palpatine's office about the plan to destroy the Jedi Order. The revelation was met by immediate reaction from the Jedi Order, as they dispatched a galaxy-wide order for the control chips to be removed, and now the orders of the Supreme Chancellor were being questioned. Padmé Amidala, who had been eager to return to her senatorial duties, wanted to take advantage of these recent findings, and gathering all the evidence, she presented it to the still fractured Senate. Most were shocked by Palpatine's misdemeanors, but they were not surprised by some of the names associated with his schemes. The captured separatists brought in by Commander Tano and the 332nd Company were now in the spotlight, and the Nemoidians of the group were only interested in saving their own skin, so they blamed each other. The crimes that Gunray in particular had been able to get away with in his previous trial, thanks to the control of Palpatine, were now exposed, alongside the rest of Sidious's council. Those of the Separatist Parliament who were not trying to profit from the war were now left in a difficult position. Though they were now free of Dooku and his control in the Parliament, and could actually put some of their ideas into action, the war had now ended, and much of the corruption they had been striving to counter had also been corrected with Palpatine's demise, so many returned to the Republic Senate. Whilst the political side of the galaxy began its recovery, the Jedi Order was trying to re-establish its trust from the civilians as peacekeepers, and also the trust of the Senate. The Jedi Council admitted their failings and conducted an internal review of the Order, and they realised that they had relied too heavily on the Senate instructions and had therefore lost their own path. A perfect opportunity arose to make amends, as Maul had emerged from his brief hibernation and wanted to take advantage of the aftermath of war. The Zabrak's goals had changed without Sidious and Obi-Wan, and now he wanted to prove that he could conquer the galaxy where those in the lineage of the Rule of Two had failed. With the assistance of his crime syndicates, Maul exploits the chaos in the Outer Rim, and he is helped by the exposure of the banking clans. The banks that had helped to regulate the galactic credit were now unavailable to prevent the post-war economic downturn, and Maul exploited the plight of the people to gain control of recovering worlds. When the Jedi eventually found out about these prospering worlds, and the connection with Maul thanks to Bo-Katan Kryze, the Jedi were wary of the former Sith, but did not want another Clone Wars scale battle. Opting to send Mace Windu and a small battalion of chip-free clone troopers as reserve, the Jedi Master correctly deduced that the Sith would not be able to resist fighting a Jedi, and lured him away to the world of Damenos via a well-placed signal. Trapping Maul on the former Sith stronghold, Windu is able to defeat the former Sith, as the previously hate-fueled Maul had lost some of his edge without Sidious and Obi-Wan to enrage him. As the galaxy now rested from the scars of war and tyranny, the truth of the events and the Invisible Hand would never be discovered, but the Republic ensured that their two heroes would not be lost in history.